Well, so the best way to approach this is to look at the arteries, familiarize yourself with the terminology, and go through and learn it picture by picture. You could spend 5 to 10 minutes on this picture and have it. And go through the next picture and the next picture and the next picture. Break it up, okay? And take each picture, and I recommend you just labeling the guy without any words on him. And when you do that, it will be easy for you to get this. So when you go through and look at them, think of the terminology that you already know. What arteries serve the head and the trunk? So think of it in that capacity. So you've got your carotid arteries are kind of important, right? Okay, so you've got an internal and an external carotid artery. The brachiocephalic trunk, we've seen that before because it's been trimmed off the aorta, right? So basically, looking at that trunk, excuse me, I'm about to sneeze, so bear with me. You know how that feeling comes. All right. So looking at the aorta, you've been seeing those trimmed off. So now you're actually seeing those arteries, the subclavian artery that we've seen coming off. The brachiocephalic trunk is cut off. Okay. The carotid arteries are cut off. So you've been looking at the aorta with all that. Now, it's kind of neat to look at this perspective and see how it all comes off, right? So now you've got it in respect to the heart. You can see the aorta. Noticing also, so here's that aortic arch, and it actually protrudes down behind the heart. Y'all see that? How it's doing that? When we get to a certain, depending on what we get to, you have arteries named for the organs that they serve. Okay? So pay attention to that. And so right here coming off the aorta, this is called the ascending portion because that goes up and it actually circles around, and that circle is called the aortic arch, and then it goes on down and it's the descending portion of the aorta. All right, and then also, don't forget, we've already covered all this, the arteries of the heart. We covered the arteries of the heart. There's your coronary artery that they're pointing out. So just follow those lines. Here's your celiac trunk. We're fixing to lead into the kidneys. You can actually see that those are the renal arteries. When we study kidneys, that's easy, right? Renal. Okay, so you'll be able to recognize that. The renal artery leads into the kidneys, and we'll be studying when we go to the urinary system, you're going to follow that artery all the way through the kidney. So right now you're getting a basic artery. So these are really basic arteries, but you have very particular arteries that we will learn. When we study the kidneys, we'll learn the names of all the arteries going in, and that's important because in the veins, because you'll learn in the kidneys, they're filtering blood. So you're going to learn a pathway. Did we learn a pathway in the heart of blood flow? When we get to the urinary system and the kidneys, you'll learn another pathway of blood, and it will actually, what do the kidneys do? They filter the blood, right? So certain things will be removed at the nephron level of the kidney, and we'll talk about that removal, and there'll be a branching point, and you'll have to follow blood back into the system, and then how the waste are removed. So we'll go in more detail, but at this point, we're looking at the renal artery, and so that artery serves the kidneys. So when you're spending time with this, recognize that. Digestive visceral arteries, okay, those are going to be pretty easy. You probably haven't heard the term mesenteric yet, but the mesentery is part of the digestive viscera, so inferior mesenteric artery. Those are named so. You can see those that are denoted. Also looking at the femoral artery that we talked about, the popliteal artery, that'll be easy, right? because that's behind the knee, that area, the anterior tibial artery. And in the foot, you've got arcuate arteries. Typically, an arcuate artery is one that arcs. Do you see the arcs? Okay? You're going to see arcuate arteries in the kidneys when we go there too. Okay? But typically, an arcuate artery will have an arcing point, and you can see that right there in the foot. So spend some time. That's what you do. Basically, you go to the picture, you look at, study the lines, where's it going, what's it doing, and then you can make a reference point in your mind. You're actually making a connection. You're like, oh, well, that's renal kidney. You're making that connection to what's happening. When you get to the liver, it's hepatic. Okay? Anything hepatic, the liver has special cells called hepatocytes. So anything hepatic is going to be serving the liver. So that's how the best way to study it. I do want you to know these major arteries that we're dealing with. These are the major arteries, okay? That's all we're looking at are major arteries. This is going to be very important a little later on. You're going to see this again when we get to the respiratory system. We talk about lungs. Again, we're going to talk about the branching of arteries. And we'll learn those different branches and what they mean, what's happening. But from this picture, you can basically see really good oxygenation and deoxygenation of blood. You can see what's happening. And you can actually see where the blood leaves, where it goes. You see all these tiny little branches in the lungs. You can see where all that goes. And basically, the picture up to the top right, what you can see is these little balloons. Does that remind you of little balloons? The little tall balloons, those are called the alveoli. This is where gas exchange occurs. Remember, the blood doesn't actually leave the blood vessels, right? So you see, remember y'all asking me that question? So you see how gas is exchanged back and forth? These little cells have little bitty slits in them that allow that exchange to occur so that the red blood cells that are inside can have exchange with the proper gases. Well, you can't see the alveoli in the picture, but there would be, if they had left them here, you would see tiny, tiny little balloons all over all of these vessels where gas exchange occurs. What happens in a patient that loses lung capacity as a result of something like emphysema, those little balloons lose their elasticity, kind of like shooting the elastic in some pantyhose, right? They just kind of flop. The elastic is gone. And so if that elastic is gone, then they lose surface area abilities where gas exchange would occur. So that's what happens in a patient who usually suffers from some type of lung disease that is developed from smoking or issues of that nature. So you can see the blood leaving the heart, going to get oxygenated, and you can also see from this picture really easy where blood re-enters the heart at the pulmonary veins, coming back in, so all that exchange occurs, and then it comes to the left side of the heart. Remember, the left side is responsible for pumping everything out to the whole body. I'm also, next week in lab we're going to dissect a sheep heart, and I'm going to put a video up for you to watch. This is a video I provide for my online students. My online students who may actually listen to this lecture will have to dissect a sheep heart in the comforts of their own home without my guidance, or the guidance that I will give them through the virtual classroom, right? So right now, at home, they got a little kit sitting there, and it's got a sheep heart in it, and they're going to dissect it just like you and I are going to do it face-to-face. And I'm going to put a little video up for you that I put up for them that I would like for you to watch before you come to lab next week. I'll put it in your Blackboard lab tab, and I'll make an announcement, like go here to look for it. But you'll see that video, and I would like for you to watch that video so that you'll have a little bit of an idea of what we'll be doing when we walk into the lab on Monday. Can y'all do that for me? It's a very helpful video. But we're going to actually make a coronal section of the heart like this, dissect it, and you'll be able to see all these cool things inside that we're going to point out. Yes. Alveoli. There's capillaries all over the alveoli. Little bitty capillary beds surround the whole entire alveoli. And that's where the exchange occurs. It's a diffusion back and forth. It's basically following a gradient to go into the oxygen coming in and the CO2 leaving. It's following its gradient to get in there. All right, now in this picture we can see the arteries of the head and neck. Again, the terminology is reflective of the body parts that we've already learned, the regions. So as you're studying these, and what's neat to me about this picture is we learned the bones, right? You remember learning the bones? How could you forget? And do you remember us studying all those little holes and crevices and all of that? Well, these pictures put all that into perspective for you. You can actually see, oh, there's those vertebral foramen. That's what they were for, right? Those transverse foramen on the vertebra. Remember the transverse foramen? What type of vertebra have transverse foramen? Cervical. The other types of thoracic and lumbar don't have it. Cervical. Why? Look right here. You see that? It's called the vertebral artery. Pretty easy, huh? That vertebral artery goes through the cervical vertebra, the transverse foramen that we studied so hard and learned, so now we know what that hole is for, right? What's that hole for? Vertebral artery. All right, so spend some time. You got the ophthalmic artery. That's going to be easy, right? You've got a lot of arteries named temporal artery, right? So we think of remember the temporal bone, maxillary artery. Remember the maxillary, right? Maxillary, mandible. Remember those bones? So those arteries are named for the bone that they're actually associated with. So this should not really be that hard. When you're getting into it, it's going to kind of come to you like, oh, I get that. I don't think you'll have any problems. You can see here this major subclavian artery, okay, coming off, and here's the axillary artery leading into and it's just called by its region, right? Axillary armpit, pretty much. So spend some time there. Here's showing you a little more detail of the trunk, right? So looking at that thoracic region, you can see the aorta really good, and there's a little bit more detail of the arteries as they enter into the upper extremities. Brachial artery and radial and ulnar artery. Those are going to be pretty easy for you, right? Remember the radius attaches to the thumb, ulna attaches to the pinky. So the radial artery is going to be the same, right, in the ulnar artery. Potentially. But I don't really give labeling tests except for in the lab practical, and then it'll even be A, B, C, D, E type situation. All right, here we are to the abdominal region. And what we can see from this picture is basically the stomach. So the duodenum from the esophagus leading into the stomach. And remember, the liver is close to this region. We've got the spleen, the purple organ on the top picture. You can see the spleen, and the artery that serves it is the splenic artery, right? So you can kind of, get familiar. You can see the pancreas there, which is located just posterior to the stomach. The superior mesenteric artery is leading into the digestive viscera. There's mesentery. When you see the word mesentery, it should make you think of digestive viscera. So the other thing you can see is the common Hepatic artery. What do we say hepatic was? Liver, okay? So that's the artery that's going to be serving the liver. So this is not going to be hard. Just spend some time with the pictures, becoming familiar with the different arteries. And then we get into the pelvic region. You can see the kidneys. We talked about the renal arteries, the suprarenal arteries that you see. So those serve the adrenal glands. So you can that's relatively easy to remember. The adrenal glands sit on top of the kidneys. Okay, and so the artery is going to be known that serves them as the suprarenal artery, serving that particular gland, the adrenal glands. So celiac trunk, also thinking of digestive viscera. You can see it coming off here kind of above where the renal arteries come in. Gonadal and the testicular and ovarian artery coming off right around that region where it should be. So that's kind of the way that I've learned. Something like the median sacral artery here coming off, it actually protrudes. Remember the sacrum has all those little holes also that we've looked at? So there's going to be those. What are those holes typically for? A blood supply. And then you've got the lower limbs. So basically coming off, you've got the common iliac artery where the branching actually occurs. You can see that. Leading into the deep arteries of the thigh, you've got the femoral artery coming off relative to the femur. And it's a major artery kind of right there, the femoral artery. Not a good one to sever, right? You lose a lot of blood. So just kind of spend some time looking at those. These pictures that we've actually kind of looked at have broken up the big picture that we looked at initially. Y'all notice that? And that's just relatively easy. What about the obturator artery? What do you think it does? Obturator. Where have you heard that word before? It was in the pelvis. Remember the hole in the pelvis called the obturator? I made you learn it if you had me. So there's you can see, think immediately, obturator artery. It's going through that marking that Miss Causey made me learn on the pelvic bone. Y'all remember that if you had me? I made you learn that obturator, which was that hole, and I made you learn the acetabulum. What was the acetabulum? Yes, good job, Alexis. So all those arteries are just named for things you've already learned. I don't think you're going to have any problem with this. And so this picture shows you all of that in a nutshell. And so here's the diaphragm separating that, and you can see this is showing you the major arteries and the areas of the body that they serve. So it's pretty helpful little chart to just kind of look at. All right, let's look at veins. Veins are the same way. This is the big picture, right? A little bit different naming, but the good thing about these pictures is the arteries are red and the veins are blue, and I'm not cutting open a cadaver and pinning them for you, right? Can you imagine what it's like to go to med school and there's no red and there's no blue? And you've got this cadaver before you, and you've got to be able to designate all of this. Can you imagine? So we just had a picture, right? But your physician has to go to school and learn all of that on a cadaver. And there's no latex injected specimens. It's all looks the same, right? So we'll start small. Just think of it as we're just starting with a picture, no big deal. So looking at these, looking at the veins, superior and inferior vena cava is always my reference point. So since we're dealing with the heart, we start there. So you can see basically the superior and inferior vena cava, where they enter and leave the heart. And that's where blood enters the heart, right? So to come, after it's circulated everywhere, it enters into the heart through both of these places. So from the upper body and the lower body, blood's going to enter the heart through the superior and inferior vena cava. So then from there you can go to the head, study it, and go to the limbs, upper limbs, study those. Then go through the thoracic region, the abdominopelvic region, and then where they branch off into the lower limbs. And again, if you've got a renal artery, then you've got to have a renal vein. Okay? So lots of, if you've got hepatic arteries, you've got hepatic veins. Again, the naming is helpful. Okay? So if you stick to that, we've got the superior and inferior mesenteric vein. We had mesenteric arteries. If you look at the veins of the upper extremities, you have a few more. And here's a trick to remember about arteries and veins. Arteries are usually deeper, okay? Your arteries are usually deeper, and the veins are usually kind of more superficial. And you can just kind of see that from these pictures. So if you put them on top of each other, you can kind of see that a little bit more. And just remember the purpose. We're trying to get blood back up, and we've got a lot more avenues to cause less resistance, right, to get it back to where it needs to go to get reoxygenated. So again, here's, and this is a little bit different view. You can see some of these from this picture, but a little bit more detail here. The jugular, right, that's a vein. So you got carotid arteries, you got jugular veins. Here's your external jugular vein, and look at there what goes through those little transverse foramen. What is it? All right, again, so we had a vertebral artery. We've also got a vertebral vein. We've got an internal and an external jugular vein, and that's something most people, you've heard the little saying, going for the jugular, right? And they're typically saying, hey, go for the throat. Because, what do we see? Right there, all right? The thyroid is something we hadn't mentioned a lot to this point. And you can see the superior and middle thyroid veins. The thyroid is in that region, and typically what do you think of when you think of thyroid? Metabolism, all right? So people, if somebody has a thyroid issue, you typically think, oh, they've got some type of metabolic issue. We had a subclavian artery. Here's our subclavian vein, okay? Brachiocephalic vein right here, leading into the subclavian artery. So the superior vena cava leads into the brachiocephalic vein and into the subclavian vein. If you noticed on the arteries, we had a whole lot more arteries go into the head, serving the head, but yet less veins. We basically have a big facial vein, right? But then we had so many more arteries serving the face. That makes sense. Why? We're not fighting gravity here. Okay? So we're fighting gravity with arteries, pumping the blood up, right? Which this way we're not as much. But the veins, so it's kind of reversed to our thought process when you're looking at the head, because when you look at the two big pictures, it looks like, oh man, there's all these veins, and there wasn't as many arteries, but that's because of the gravity issue. Here, not the case. It looks like a lot less veins than there were arteries, and it's because of having to fight gravity, not so much here. Upper trunk, again, we can see the jugular is really good. All right, from this angle, you can see internal and external jugular really easy. Everybody see that? So you can see those. You can see coming off the superior vena cava, the brachiocephalic, and the right subclavian veins coming off. Those are different, even though they look the same. They're named differently because, remember, they are very different because of the location of the heart. The location of the heart's a little left, right? So a little bit further to go, depending on, yes? Uh-huh. What now? Uh-huh. You're asking me, is it? Yeah, they're referring, these are all digits. Yes. We still have an ulnar and a radial vein. Everybody see that? So lots, if you learn the arteries, you probably pretty much got the veins learned. Again, we're looking at the hepatic veins. The suprarenal, again, that's referring to the adrenal glands. We've got gonadal veins again. We've got all kind of veins that serve the digestive viscera. You can see the digestive viscera very good here coming in. And here's this mesentery, and here's what anchors this. So we've got mesenteric veins coming through the mesentery. The mesentery anchors all the digestive viscera. Yes. Yep. You know, most every organ has the serous membranes, and the digestive viscera have that as well, but then on top of that, they have all this mesentery. And if you look, have you ever looked at a fetal pig? Like, if you open up, you can see it all really well, and it's just a big anchoring material to keep all that. I mean, you got lots of intestines. Yes. You got several feet of intestines, so you got to have this anchoring material, and that's called mesentery. Let's see. All right, and then we have the veins of the lower extremities. Again, you had a popliteal artery, you got a popliteal vein. So you're just really not going to have, I don't believe you're going to have a whole lot of problems learning these, and I really don't think it will take you long to learn them. Just spend some time there. I think there's some activities on Mastering A&P or on Blackboard that are just simple filling in the diagram pictures that would be helpful. So make sure and do that. You've got that option. And again, we've got to sum it up table or graph picture to help you see all the areas, kind of link them together above the diaphragm and below the diaphragm. And this is kind of an overview. I would probably spend more time just looking at the actual pictures of the human and matching them up that way. All right. Is there any questions that you have?